All right. Welcome everybody to the first ever Bad Mage live broadcast. I'm Chris Medina, and as always is my co-host Michael Conroe.
I guess as always, being we've done one episode of Bad Mage Live, and I'm now here 100% of the time.
Yeah. Well, this is the successor to the Bad Mage podcast that we never quite made it into a podcast.
A
Um,
wildly popular Bad Mage podcast.
Wildly
I
popular, almost
retain
100
my
views.
role.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we were crushing it. Um, so if you're curious, if you are fans, or if you followed us for our first couple episodes, you'll notice that we didn't post an episode last week, and we are now here and we're live streaming instead of posting our video on YouTube with our previously scheduled date. So we took a lot of the feedback that we were receiving from our great fans and contributors, and the general consensus was that if it's not going to be a podcast, which we never actually got onto Spotify or wherever podcasts go, we never actually got that far. Um, an hour is kind of long to consume the content that we're talking about. So we are trying to condense our episodes into 30 minutes long, and we decided to live stream them in case we wanted viewer participation. Additionally, we will be editing the video to or editing the live stream to remove the excess fluff and then put a kind of condensed version of the episode on YouTube in case you didn't want to watch the VOD or you just prefer to watch it on YouTube.
In case you're one of our many followers on YouTube and weren't aware that this one's going to be on Twitch. Why don't we get right into it then? What's kind of on our agenda for today?
All right. Well, the big thing was, so we actually did record an episode last week. We didn't post it, and that's fine. What we talked about last week was our predictions for the new patch that had came out on Tuesday. So today we can talk about kind of our week in review, right? So let's pretend we didn't film that episode because we didn't post it anyway, so it doesn't matter. And let's just talk about our feelings 1 week after the patch. You know, how we feel about it, what decks are we playing, what decks are we playing against, how do we feel about the philosophy of Riot's patches, the cards they changed, etc.
Yeah, I mean, since my audio was the one that can never get released, I'm just going to say that all my predictions were right. No one can disprove that. So
I mean, I can go in post and kind of increase the decibels on your audio sections, and we can see who
we'll
is
see.
okay. I won't do any of that, but in theory.
As far as the world's concerned, I got everything right.
Okay. Well, what are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts post patch? First things first, I thought the first couple of days after the patch were just like really weird and stressful. I couldn't tell what was good. Like people kept claiming they had like the new best deck, and I would play them, and they just all seemed like so mediocre, like
Oh
just so
wow.
much worse than the decks I was playing pre-patch.
Wow.
And I think kind of where we are now, it's that's kind of just been proven. I feel like the good decks are literally just the pre-patch decks, but like 6 cards changed, or like 10 or less cards changed. Like
Wow.
elusives are good. You can't play like the Demacia as much anymore. Instead, you play Freljord for the most part. I mean, there are Demacia versions out there. I've played them, but I think the Freljord version's better. Shadow Isle is still good. They just like Ross is not good anymore, so they look for other end games, which right now has tended to be the harrowing, right?
Mhm.
Um, but like, so my overall thoughts on the patch were, I thought it was a fine first step. I'm glad that they are trying to make small changes rather than just gutting things. I don't think they got all the way there yet, and I think the thing I was more happy with was I tried to brew with literally every card that got buffed last week, and because those were almost all cards I hadn't played before, I don't know if they're actually way better now or if they were always fine, and I'm just finding out now that these cards were okay,
Sure.
and now they're like pretty playable.
Yeah.
I think Emerald Protector, there's probably like the biggest one that stood out to me. That card's really potent with
Jeweled
elusive
Protector.
minions. Yeah, Jewel Protector.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
Emerald
Jewel
Awakener's
Protector,
the other
if you
one.
don't know, or if it doesn't ring a bell off the top of your head, is now a 5 mana 4/4 that gives a unit in your hand +3/+3. It's a pretty powerful effect. It was a 3/3 before, so I think it got overlooked, and now it's seeing play in quite a few decks as a 4/4. And in those decks, sometimes a 5/5 for 5, which is just fine. It's really strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was overlooking at the time, and maybe pre-patch too, I didn't really play with the card outside of Expedition. Is like in my mind, it was, you're playing on curve the whole game, right? You're trying to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's buffing like the Empyrean or something as some super finisher. The reality is, a lot of times, like you are going to play on curve to the best of your ability, but you're going to draw lower cost minions during your draw steps, and it buffing a Shadow Assassin or a Green Glade duo that suddenly becomes this 2 or 3 mana huge threat that you can play. It's just like really good. Like you're not spending that much of your mana on that turn, and you have this evasive minion that just chunks them really hard afterwards.
Yeah.
Like at that point, they are 2 mana Empyreans essentially.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, are there any cards that you don't agree with the nerfs, or
That I don't agree with the nerfs. I'm sure you have those cards. Me personally, I'm fine with pretty much everything. Um, the nerf to Inspiring Mentor, which I called for, was a lot more brutal than I thought it would be. That card sucks. Like, haven't seen that played all week. Since like,
it probably won't be played?
yeah, I mean, it's just like bad at this point, right? 1/2 does not matter, and then I don't know. I almost wonder if it would be better if it only buffed toughness instead of only buffing attack.
Well, that's they thought the toughness was more important, right? So that's the reason they took it away.
I mean, I do think the toughness is more important,
Yeah.
specifically against Piltover and so on, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Or even Shadow Isles a little bit with Vile Feast.
I'll go ahead and say it. I wasn't a fan of that patch. So we talked about it episode 2. If you want to watch our YouTube episode 2 of the Bad Mage podcast, we talked about it. I actually didn't think a lot was going to get changed, and I didn't think it needed to get changed. While people may have been upset, I still don't have those numbers or those stats on what percentage of the population of what elos were complaining.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it was actually problematic. The format seemed balanced, right? I mean, there was some lack of interaction. There's ways to improve that. We didn't actually accomplish that with these patches, right? Like there's still the same amount of lack of interaction. If anything, there's more control deck, so it feels like there's more interaction. But even in a control deck, right? It's the icy grip of control, right? Like everything you do is actually futile. I mean, they're just they have inevitability on their side, but that's besides the point. I don't think that any of the I don't think any of the cards needed to be touched. There were the ones that were nerfed were the ones that we all thought if they had to nerf cards, that's what they nerfed. I don't think I agreed with how they nerfed them, or the cards themselves just being nerfed to begin with. I'm not a fan. I don't like it, and it didn't actually change anything, right? Like SI decks are still outside of playing Rasa and Ladros, right? Like SI Fearsome is still an archetype, right? That was the dominating archetype pre-patch. Elusives is still a dominating archetype as it was pre-patch. The shell's a little different now, but I mean, so they're not actually solving for the issues that I think they were trying to solve for. I don't know. Obviously, they couldn't have known that, right? So, they're dealing with trying to tell the future. They have a hard job. I'm not going to sit here and bash them for it, but I really think that this was an attempt to kind of calm down the user base from all the memes on the subreddit. But I don't.
That didn't happen, by the way.
Yeah, I know. It's
still
it's
memes aplenty.
Happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen. So I don't know, man. I was pretty disappointed. Maybe they felt like they had to do something because it was their first big patch. I don't know. I was pretty disappointed. But that is what it is. And so when we were going over the patch notes, I kind of speculated that spiders would be good again, right? Like, it was never bad. It just wasn't like great. And I actually think that didn't change at all. Like it's still in the same spot in my mind. It's not a great deck, but you could definitely grind with it, and it's still good, still competitive. It's changed a little bit. Strife Crow is streaming a version with fresh offerings, and that was pretty good. And I played that to some pretty good success. And so if you're looking for a deck, if you're still unsure what the meta's, what to play in this meta, I mean,
play Mistwraiths. Problem solved.
Play Miss Race, play Elusive, play whatever deck you were playing before the patch. Honestly, it doesn't really matter.
Don't play Ash Noxus if that was a deck you were playing before the patch.
Yeah, I was never a fan of that deck. I mean, I like drawing cards.
It's
I feel
not
like that
it's
deck
not
does
good,
well.
but like it was playable before. Like you had challenger guys to pick off elusives, and like Frostbite kind of let you race. The issue is that deck is not good against hard control decks, and those actually exist now. So put that one on the back burner for now.
So what have you been playing on ladder?
I've been playing Mistwraiths.
SI scum through and through, huh?
I mean, it's just the best deck, man. Like, they need to take those elusives back to Florida. Like, that's I don't know. I think the issue. I think elusives pre-patch were actually the best deck. Like the Relentless Pursuit back-to-back hyper aggro elusive deck. Like I thought that was kind of the best deck, and Mistwraiths was close. But right now, I feel like SI still has the best early game across the board. Like I think some elusive draws are better, especially if you're playing one of like the cheesy standalone versions. Like those draws are really good. I think the PNZ decks are terrible, or the PNZ Noxus like burn deck. Like I think that was a meme that should have died out in the first 3 days. You need to stop playing that.
They kind of steal wins, right? I mean, I can see the appeal. The games are going to be quick. You concede the minute your opponent gains 1 life, or you gimmick them out and try to kill them.
My experience against that deck is normally they play something, I play the card Vile Feast, and it doesn't feel like it's a game anymore.
They have a lot of X ones, yeah.
Yeah, but like either way, I think with Shadow Isles right now, and in this episode that never got released, I kind of talked about how their early game functionally didn't change, right? The only card that changed was Wraithcaller losing Fearsome. And so what actually changed is all their late game got nerfed, and they've changed that. They've decided recently that their new late game is going to be play the Harrowing, get back Hecarims that have kept dying with Hecarim and the Rekindler, and just like one shot you. Like that's our new late game plan. And so you still have super good early game. You have removal that's all. I mean, we've talked about this. Maybe it's not limited in scope, but they are technically situational, even if right now the situations are too broad. But you have like all these cards to get you to the late game. Your late game's powerful, and your mid game's powerful. So like, I imagine that is functionally the best deck.
So, what changes do you want to see?
Changes do I want to see? I want to see buffs personally.
Yep.
I think you could keep going after this region with nerfs, and maybe I think the only region like in whole that could even like see a nerf at this point is SI. I think they actually did a good job toning down Ionia. Elusives is still a good deck, but
toning down Ionia.
yes,
trying to gut Ionia is what they did.
Well, they missed. All right,
they did miss.
Just a flesh wound.
That doesn't mean they didn't try.
Okay, but I'll try and fail, and now we're in I think a pretty good spot. They have good cards, just like most people are supposed to. I think there are specific SI cards you could touch. I'm not sure which ones you're supposed to. I think most people point at Hecarim, and I can see it. He's a little front loaded for I think what was supposed to be an archetype card for ethereals. He's just a Shadow Isles card at the end of the day. But really, I want to see buffs to some of these other regions. Like, give me a reason to play. I think Noxus is the big one. I think Noxus is terrible. I think it's the worst faction by like a country mile. But even Demacia, like Demacia has so many cards tied up in like weird archetypes that the archetypes themselves aren't really good enough. So I feel like the only time we're playing Demacia is splashing for their like few good cards, right? And that's kind of how it was before, even with elusives. Like we'd play back to back and we'd play some of their pump spells and Relentless Pursuit, but elites, it feels all or nothing. Like elites has to be good, and like all the Lux cards are just terrible, like the Mage Seekers. So like 2 of their 4 archetypes kind of feel dead in the water to me.
Yeah, it's a first set, so I don't think contrary to whatever their design philosophy or intent is, I'm not quite sure they can make every card viable, right?
Yeah.
Every card has a deck to live in. Sure, it doesn't mean they're all going to be good, right? Or even viable, which is Yasuo's case. So
Yeah.
speaking of Yasuo, actually, so they did buff Yasuo, but they did buff Yasuo.
They buffed the card Yasuo.
Yeah, they buffed the card Yasuo, which doesn't do anything. The that archetype is so bad. It's very fun. Obviously, I love it. I played it a lot. When elo doesn't matter, right? If you're playing at iron, bronze, silver, gold, you'll do fine with that deck. It doesn't really matter what you're doing at that elo. It was a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun to play. I get it, but the archetype needs help. The card itself might need help, maybe a different buff, but that's besides the point. That buff didn't do anything. It was kind of a. I get frustrated just thinking about it.
I mean, it was supposed to be a compensation buff because they knew they were nerfing multiple cards in Ionia that like weren't making Yasuo a problem, but were making other decks a problem. So they're like, all right, give him something so he's hopefully remains around the same. I don't think that worked.
Nope.
I think we both predicted it wouldn't work, though
Yep.
it looked like a pretty big overall nerf.
Yep.
I think it was. I actually think, and we've talked about this a little, the biggest buff Yasuo is going to get is more cards being released. One of Ionia's themes is recalling cards,
Yep.
which turns on Yasuo. I think once Yasuo can play a deck that is not Noxus all the time,
For
because
stuns,
all
yeah.
the stun cards are in Noxus. Like
Yep.
if he can play Ionia whatever he wants because the shell is just an Ionia, that'll be like the biggest buff.
I agree.
Right now.
He seems very obviously like one of the few champions that require you to be in a specific region that is not his own, and that doesn't feel good. I mean, I've tried to play it without it. It doesn't really work, right? When you're 100% in recalls, and it's just not working that way. Another issue is the deck doesn't do anything if you don't have Yasuo, right? That's another issue. There's the ghost like OTK gimmick, right? You can't rely on it. The deck is not doing anything if you don't have Yasuo, and I don't know how to solve for that other than maybe making Entreat playable in the deck. And how do you do that? By expanding, Yeah.
You let him play Freljord.
Right, exactly.
Tutor for his Yasuos.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I just think the biggest thing right now is like the set is very small, and regardless of like maybe they have another balance patch, maybe this one hits the mark a little bit more. I think right now the card pool is so limited that we are going to fall into a situation where people figure out the best decks pretty quickly. Like, how much metagaming can you really do right now? There's a handful of playable one drops at all. Like, you can't change that no matter how much you want to, right? And that kind of goes for a lot of spots on the curve. It feels like.
Maybe I'm not sure. I'm not sure I agree with that entirely. So, Wizards of the Coast had a similar issue where their formats were getting solved quickly, and they decided to deny information as a resource, and that's how they tried to do that, right? So while I'm not a fan of that, I actually think that might have more impact than the limiting size of a card pool. And the reason I say that is every day that I'm looking at Twitch and I'm looking at streamers, they're playing different decks. They're playing decks that didn't exist the day prior, and it's the shell. Sure, it's a 40 card deck, right? So the shells are similar, but the nuances and the individual cards that make them different are what make them different. Like when Zixo was playing the Wayfinder deck, which we had also brewed a Wayfinder deck previously, just to throw it out there. That's what I ended up finally hitting some benchmarks with, right? And it was fun that I've played a deck similar to this, and he figured it out when we didn't spend enough time maybe to get there, and he figured it out, and it was powerful. And on paper, I didn't really like some of the one drops it was tutoring with Wayfinder, but I think they're the best ones, especially now that Mentor's nerfed.
Yeah.
Especially since Mentor doesn't even do anything if he gets Wayfinder anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like stuff like that is still happening, and we're 5 weeks in or whatever. I mean, that's not too fast, right? And the harrowing decks are popping up. That's due to a patch, but still, I'm not entirely sure it's that is limited to. It's probably a contributing factor, but I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think what WotC did is probably more impactful, in my opinion.
I just think it would be hard in this game because I think with WotC, they like all the results are mostly coming from tournaments. You can't really limit tournaments. I feel like most of the things people find are from content creators in this game.
Yeah.
you can't really limit people's Twitch streams and their Twitters and stuff.
Well, they don't account for a large percentage of the games being played, right? And that's where the WotC 4.0 deck list, 5.0 deck list came in handy, right? Because not every streamer was streaming those Moto deck lists that were making 5.0s, but we still had all of that data to aggregate from. So a random user who was really hot that day and it wasn't streaming is a nobody for all intents and purposes. There was plenty times when I used to compete where I would just pull up a undefeated deck list from those daily events that nobody had seen in the meta and give it a try and do well at locals and
Yeah, I guess my main point is it doesn't seem like Riot is aggregating the data in this, like whereas WotC was. Like this is people submitting their decks to Mobalytics and decks of Runeterra.
right now. So
For now,
yeah, I mean Riot does have that data. They've chosen to not post it. They've chosen to not make their API accessible in that capacity at the moment, but they do have that data, or maybe they don't. I doubt. I have a lot of faith in Riot, so I'm assuming they have ways to identify what archetypes people are playing at what elos and what the win percentage is. They my presumption is they have access to all of that data. They just haven't given us a way to consume it yet.
Yeah. So I feel like this is flowing a little bit into our next topic. Do you want to talk about maybe outside of the metagame of Runeterra, kind of the game in a whole, and maybe some of the problems or concerns you have, or some of the good things you feel about the game?
Yeah, no, actually, that's a good segue. I just want to go ahead and throw it out there. I really enjoy Runeterra. If anybody from Riot's watching, I really enjoy the game. I think it's great, and I think it was well designed enough and well tested and well balanced enough that we didn't need all these nerfs. So that's my personal opinion.
I do agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it might not have been the most exciting, but it felt very balanced. I knew, whatever. That's besides the point. I have a lot of concerns with the state of Runeterra, and it's unfair. The game has only been out 5 weeks, right? 6 weeks, whatever, however long it's been out. But I have a lot of concerns. Some of which are it doesn't seem to be a popular game. The Twitch viewership is reflecting very low spectator, a low spectator count, and the fact that there isn't a lot of ways to profit from it kind of makes me feel that Riot is maybe at least currently, treating it like a second-class citizen amongst its IPs. And I've read some articles recently where they were from some devs saying that they wanted to see what players liked before they decided to go into delve into esports, right? And not every game needs to have esports. As a competitive player, I would like to see that, but there's no kind of any event, right? I feel like, and I hate to throw this comparison, but Hearthstone comes out some 2013, whatever, 2014. It's in beta. It's insanely popular on Twitch. People are having. I competed in ESL events before ladder was a thing on Hearthstone. Before whatever, it had so much popularity and so much energy behind it that streamers and third-party company organizations, everybody was doing this, and then eventually Blizzard, at BlizzCon they had this big event, which was also while the game was in beta in its first year, and there was so much hype behind it, and the Twitch viewer count was appropriately insane for what it was, and it feels like maybe that's what. This is all arbitrary. This is just my opinion, but it feels like that's what Riot was hoping for with Runeterra, and they didn't get that, and I don't know where they stand or how they feel, and it's a little concerning to me as someone who's pouring in a lot of energy, grinding on ladder and doing these podcasts and doing these streams, and I genuinely want to assist the community, and I want to help grow the game, but we're just two people, right? And we're not even popular streamers. Like, we don't have that kind of energy. I mean, hopefully we'll have some impact on the community, but I have no delusion of being the reason that Runeterra. I'm not going to be a total biscuit for League of Legends, right? Like, I'm not going to be like a large percentage of the reason why people are playing this game, and I just have a lot of concerns about the future of the game outside of the game itself, right? Like the game itself, I'm pretty happy with. Even though if I don't agree with the nerfs, it's fine. I'd like to see the meta evolve. If they did that all the time, I think that'd be pretty cool. Having to relearn a meta, that's exciting. It's a lot of energy. And the game is beautiful, fun to watch. But how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm almost a little concerned that it almost to me feels like it came out too early. Like, I don't know what their justification is. Like, I haven't seen a lot of advertising for it or a lot of
Yeah.
energy poured into it, and I wonder if that's because they're writing it off as like this game is in beta still. Like, the people that are playing it are just passionate about card games, and we don't need to throw them that many bones. But it it does feel like it took like a huge hit. Like the most popular I've ever seen it was during the closed beta waves, where to get a key you had to be in a stream that had
Hmm.
drops enabled,
Yeah.
and there was like 20,000 people watching all the time, and I was like, man, this game's gonna be like the Hearthstone killer. Like,
Yeah.
Magic might as well stop dumping money into their online client because it's over. Riot's on the
Right.
scene.
Yeah.
It feels like the game came out and then kind of like nothing. It was like
Yeah.
the Hearthstone streamers that were tired of streaming Hearthstone all came over. They brought their followings for the most part. I watch Strife Crow and Hyped, and I was watching Tides of Time. He's been gone for a while. Um, like all those people are here, and it's just like what's the point to a certain extent? Like
Yeah.
we don't even know why we're climbing the ladder. There's no tournaments. Again, I do feel like at some point the card pool is going to be a limiting factor. Like, are they ready on release within? I think they said they're releasing within the first half of 2020, so by June at the latest. Like, do they have more cards on deck to kind of reinvigorate the meta immediately? Um, and these are all concerns I would have. Like, I don't think the game can sustain this if their release date's June with just like no more input. Like there needs
Yeah.
to be something done.
Yeah. So, and this is just so I hate to nitpick, right? I hate to be that guy, but on browsing the internet, browsing the official sources, the Reddit, the Runeterra webpage, right? Browsing all of these sources, there's like one person on the dev team that actually responds to the community consistently, and I would just like to see more communication, I guess, right? Like I'm in all of the discords. I know that I don't even know if it's a Runeterra official Discord, but I know there's a LOR competitive Discord where they have tournaments. But
Yeah,
I don't even know. I mean, I have to do more research on that. I'm not even sure if that's going to be the official format that Riot adopts, right? That Runeterra adopts. I don't know. I
I
don't
don't
know what I
believe it
want.
is. I think they're all fan made at this point.
Yeah, it feels very. It feels. I don't know. It doesn't feel encouraging to pour this much effort into anything to be unaware of the future. I'm going to continue because I really do enjoy the game for now, obviously,
Yeah,
and yeah, I mean that's what it is, right? Like it's a great game. It's super fun. It's definitely refreshing, from all the other games that we've played. And I'm personally burnt out of Magic. I've played it. I know you're still playing, but I've played it way too
love
long. And
Magic, baby.
okay, so back to the Runeterra podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, if this is ever turning into a Pioneer podcast, let me know. I can
okay,
rant for days.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I need something more. Anything, right? I need weekly blog articles from the dev team saying what they're experimenting with, right? I've read a lot of articles from members of the dev team, very few since the game came out, but like a lot of interviews from different sites, and they had some interesting things to say. The game comes out, like I said, I know it hasn't been that. I feel like such a complainer. I know objectively the game hasn't been out that long, but I just can't help but say, where's the energy, right? Like, what are they doing about their low? And I know Twitch isn't the end all, right? It's not the
Right.
master, it's not the determining factor of is this game successful, right? But that's another question I have. How does Riot quantify their success? What are their metrics to say that this game was successful, that this game had a successful launch, that this game is crushing it right now? Is their determining factor we have X amount of daily active users. We have, and that has nothing to do with Twitch, right? Daily active users logging in, completing quests, doing, right? What is their determining factor of success? Let me know so I can kind of say, yeah, by their metric, the game is doing fine. Like they don't plan on doing much because they're already there, right? Like if that's the case, that's the case. But it doesn't feel like that's the case. Like I can't imagine, and this is arbitrary, my opinion, and I'm projecting, but I can't imagine that if I was on the Runeterra dev team that I would be happy with the energy behind it currently at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's complaining out of like love or passion for the game, and it's something we want to see succeed. So it's not like an attack on Riot so
Yeah,
much as we want this to be the best it can possibly be.
right.
Um, I think one of the biggest things I found, I think this last week was probably the least I've played Runeterra. Um, Part of it was like I just hit Diamond, it was kind of like, I don't know, taking a break at the milestone a little bit, then the patch hit, like whatever. Um, but I feel like in the beginning, it was so cool to see the meta evolve every week. It'd be like wildcard day, and then like there's just these crazy new decks I've never
Yeah,
seen. I'm like, dude, people are playing Ash. Like I thought this card was unplayable
yeah,
literally one day ago,
yeah,
and now it feels like I can build pretty much any deck I want to in the game, and maybe some of like the spark got taken away at that point. So it's not discovering so much as it's like honing down these lists and really refining my 40s, which is, I mean, it's still great. Like that's what card games are about to some extent, but it was, in my opinion, a little bit cooler when it was like week one, some guy bought the Fioras, and like I couldn't do that yet, but I was just waiting for week two.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like that guy's deck was sick, but like I can make it better. Like yeah,
My thing is mainly I don't have a reason to be on the hamster wheel, right? Like there's nothing keeping me going. I don't have a carrot to keep chasing, right?
yeah. I mean, we're both pursuing masters for credibility reasons, and then like what's next after that? I
Right,
guess.
exactly. Yeah, like I don't know. But I feel like we spent a lot of time on that. We agree on that.
Yeah.
So a new segment that I wanted to try out today, I guess, was I wanted to give some informative, interesting ruling information in case our viewers aren't aware. There are some pretty cool ones that I have aggregated here.
Okay.
So this one kind of makes sense, but I'm gonna do this one anyway, right? And this is actually from the competitive LOR Discord. These aren't original. We'll be doing our research to come up with interesting things, but the competitive LOR Discord has a lot of these in there already, and it's pretty cool, pretty interesting to know. So the stack, right? The play area when you play a fast spell, when you play a slow spell, when you play a skill, they go in the middle of the screen. That's what we're calling the stack in parentheses. It maxes out at 9 fast skills slash spells. Interestingly enough, once that limit is reached, you can still play spells. They just can't be fast spells or skills, or they can only be burst
They have
spells
to
at
be
that point
first.
because they don't use
Yeah.
the stack, right? So it's another interesting way to evaluate the game, right? It's another interesting thing that separates the Legends of Runeterra from other card games. I mean, we're familiar with split second from Magic, so we understand how that works in a stack context. I don't know if Runeterra is happy with that nomenclature, but
Yeah. So I have one that I didn't know the answer to the other day that luckily didn't come up, but it could have. Do you know what happens? Um, I think most people probably know at this point. You can only have 6 allies on your bench, but once your allies start attacking, at that point in time, you can have more than 6 if some of them are in your bench and some of them are attacking.
yep.
So if I attack with, let's say, all 6 allies, and
Mm-hmm.
then I Vile Feast something after blocks,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a spider on my bench before combat resolves, but none of my allies die, do you know which ally I end up losing? Is it my rightmost minion that was attacking?
I assume so. Yeah.
That's what I assumed as well. I didn't know. It didn't happen, so I can't confirm it. I can't imagine the spider gets kicked off. But
Well, when you're
if
procedurally generating, like via Hecarim or release, it's usually the thing furthest to the right that it generates and then it fizzles.
right, I've just never seen it where like something had to come back to the bench and couldn't. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I would assume it's the rightmost thing, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
know that for sure.
Sure.
So if anyone does know, let me know.
Yeah. Fair enough. Right. Well, I think in an effort to keep these literally half as long as our previous episodes, I think that's pretty much what we got here for this episode of Bad Mage Live. In post, when I put this on YouTube, there might be an echo when I say live there. That'll be pretty neat.
It's just some good homemade sound effects right there,
Yeah,
free of
exactly.
charge.
Yeah. So yeah, we're still working on the Twitch page, right? There's no panels in there. It doesn't say anything about our channel or who we are, what we do, etc. Though we'll be updating that slowly. We're still planning on future content, our Versus series, so look out for that. Look out for the YouTube update. We're gonna go to Twitter and some other social active.
I think we got to commit to getting some kind of video out this week.
Yeah,
And just flame us on Bad Mage Live next week if this rolls around and there's no more content.
yeah.